In the peaceful neighborhood of Springwood, two families lived next door to each other. The first was Linda, a dedicated single mother, and her 12-year-old son, Brian. The second was David, a reserved single father, and his daughter, Sophie, who was also 12. Linda and David exchanged pleasantries but weren't particularly close. However, their children, Brian and Sophie, became inseparable friends. They walked to school together, played in the afternoons, and even constructed a small clubhouse in Brian's backyard. One afternoon, Linda glanced out the window and saw the kids painting their clubhouse, their laughter echoing through the yard. She smiled, but a sense of worry crept in. They're growing up so fast, she thought. Brian and Sophie shared everything with each other: secrets, dreams, and fears. One Saturday, they were sitting in the clubhouse, chatting. Brian asked Sophie, "Do you ever wonder what it'll be like when we're older? Like, living on our own?" Sophie pondered for a moment. "Not really. I like how things are now. Don't you?" Brian replied, but then added, "Sometimes I think about things, like stuff we see in movies. Do you ever think about that?" Sophie shook her head. "No." "Why?" Before Brian could explain, they heard Linda calling, "Brian, it's time for dinner." They left the clubhouse, but Brian couldn't shake the question from his mind. The movies he had been watching lately sparked his curiosity about things he didn't fully understand. Sophie, however, didn't dwell on it. She was content playing and spending time with her best friend. One day after school, as they walked home, Sophie asked, "Brian, why do you watch those grown-up movies?" "My dad says kids our age shouldn't watch them." Brian shrugged. "I don't know. They're just interesting, I guess. Don't you ever wonder about that stuff?" Sophie looked at him curiously but shook her head. "No, I think it's boring. I like watching cartoons better." Brian laughed. "Cartoons are fun, but I like learning about new things too." They reached their houses and Sophie waved goodbye. "See you tomorrow," she said, running to her front door. A few weeks later, on a rainy Saturday, Brian and Sophie decided to watch a movie together in Brian's living room. Linda was at work, and David had gone out for errands. They browsed through Brian's movie collection, and he chose a film he thought would be thrilling. "I don't know about this," Sophie said, as the movie began showing scenes she wasn't used to. "It's just a movie," Brian said, trying to sound nonchalant. "It's not real." But as they watched, Sophie started feeling uneasy. She glanced at Brian and noticed he seemed a bit different, more serious than usual. "Do you think people really do stuff like that?" Sophie asked quietly. Brian shrugged again but remained silent. The movie ended, and they sat in silence for a while. "Let's go to the clubhouse," Brian finally suggested. Sophie nodded, and they dashed outside into the rain.